What's up, guys? I'm Dan, this is Baking with Dan, and this year I'm hosting a Friendsgiving. And for my Friendsgiving, I'm making a cranberry apple tart. So today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make my Friendsgiving cranberry apple tart. And it starts with a really simple, sweet tart dough. I love this tart recipe because you don't even have to roll out the dough, you can just press it into the pan. So follow along here, I'll show you how simple it is. In my mixer bowl, I have just one stick of unsalted butter that's been softened. It's not very soft, it's been softened slightly. So I'll cream this for a second just to loosen it up. Add your confectioner's sugar. I'm adding a little bit of finely ground almond meal to my tart dough because I'm using almonds in the main tart. I think it tastes really great. I'm going to add just a bit of salt and then some vanilla extract. We want this tart to be just as delicious and tender as it can be, even if we were just eating it on its own. So cream this together until it's nice and smooth, about a minute or two. So give your bowl and beater a scrape, and then we're going to add 1 egg yolk. And I've reserved the white just to the side here. So we'll blend this one more time, get this yolk blended in. So all at once now you want to add in your all-purpose flour. We'll blend this on low just until the dough starts to look crumbly and starts to come together, and then we'll bring it together the rest of the way using our hands. So my dough still looks just a touch too dry, so I'm going to add maybe just a teaspoon of my reserved egg white, blend it for another couple seconds. So this dough won't be as smooth as a cookie dough. It still looks a little crumbly, but once you can kind of press it together into a mound in your hand, that's exactly what you're looking for. So now you want to grab your tart pan. For this tart, I'm using just a standard 9-inch round non-stick tart pan. And then to get this dough into the pan, I like to press with my hands and start flattening it out into a disc. You can kind of do some of the hard work when the dough is still in our hands. So turn in your hands, flatten it. We're looking to just make it into a round disc. And then I'm just going to place this disc in the pan. If you don't have a non-stick pan, you can either really lightly spray the pan, but I would recommend just putting a touch of flour in the bottom. So place your circle in the center, and then using floured hands, just start to press the dough outwards. And this outward edge, we always want to leave it a little bit thicker because we're also going to push that outward edge up the side of the tart pan. So at this point, I like to use something flat like a cup or a measuring cup just to press the dough evenly and really compact it down. And then you can also use the side of this to start to press the dough up the sides. And this is a pretty forgiving dough. If you find that you have a chunk missing, or if you find that you are a little heavy over here, a little short over here, just take a chunk of the dough and then put it in place where you need it. Really make sure you push the dough into the edge of the pan, because we want the tart to have a nice shape once we depan it. So I have this pressed in place, and you'll notice that I left about 1/4 of an inch or just slightly under 1/2 of an inch of the dough extending beyond the top of the rim. Piercing the dough like this, which is called docking, will help the dough from puffing up too much during its pre-bake. It will still puff a little bit, but not as much as it would. And I like to extend this up the side. So once you're happy with how you've pressed your dough into your tart pan, just place it in the freezer for about 30 minutes to rest. So once your tart is nice and chilled, you want to give it a pre-bake so that it has a chance to start baking before we fill it with custard and cranberries and apples. So take your tart, place it on a parchment lined sheet, and then I like to take a square of parchment that's about 12 inches, crumple it up, and then place your parchment, press it down into the tart shell, and then we need some type of pie weight to hold the parchment in place and keep the tart from puffing up. So I'm just using some brown rice here because I have plenty of it. You could use dried beans, you could use ceramic pie weights. Any dry food item you have will pretty much work. And then press this into place. You want to get that down into these corners. And I'm going to put this in my oven that I preheated to 350 degrees and bake it for about 15 minutes. So after 15 minutes, you want to take your tart shell out of the oven and then carefully remove some of the rice or pie weights from the center of the parchment. Carefully peel back the parchment from the rest of the tart. And now we want to place this back into our 350-degree oven for about another 10 to 12 minutes until the inside of the tart doesn't look raw. We want it to bake just a bit more. So I'll let my tart cool and I'll start preparing my cranberries, my apples, and my filling. Once your shell is just cooled to warm, you just want to take a serrated knife and just find the edge of the knife, just cut in a little bit. And then you just slowly want to cut away using the top of the tart pan as a guide. And then I like to use some of these tart crumbs just to crush up and place back in the tart. Adds another little element of texture. And it also helps to add a barrier between the moisture from the apples especially and the tart shell so that we still have a nice firm, crisp tart once it's all baked. So to make your apple butter filling, start by taking your egg, crack it into a bowl, and then just take a whisk and just beat it up slightly. So we're going to add our granulated sugar and our brown sugar to the egg. Break up any lumps, just whisk it until it's smooth. I'm also going to add a couple of pinches of salt, a little more vanilla extract for that wonderfully warm flavor, and then some cinnamon. Not too much cinnamon. What I love about this filling using this apple butter, it's so great, is that it's already spiced. So there's already a good amount of spice by way of cloves in here, depending on the apple butter that you're using. So we'll give this another whisk. And then in with all of your apple butter. Not only does this apple butter add a really nice fall spice to this tart, but it just adds such a deep color, which contrasts really well with the apples and the cranberries. So once we have all of our liquids whisked together, sprinkle over top your all-purpose flour and your almond meal. Nice and smooth, beautiful. So we'll set this aside. So now comes the really fun part, the really creative, artistic part, which is putting our tart together. And that's one of the things I love about tarts so much. It's almost like you're decorating the tart as you're putting it together. You can arrange the apples, the cranberries, the almonds, however you like. If you want to space the apples out, go for it. Have fun with it. But the first step is just to add our filling. So spread around your filling. You want a nice even layer. And I should mention that I still have my oven at 350 degrees. So I'll start by taking my apples. I started with 2 whole apples and cut them in half so I'd have 4 pieces. After I sliced them, I took that 4th apple piece and kind of wedged the rest of the slices in between the other 3 apples because I want 3 mounds of apple in my pie. So I'll take the apples, just give them a little press to fan them out outwards. And then I'll just press them lightly into my filling. So I'll do the same thing with the other 2 sets of apples. Kind of in like a tri-pointed shape. Just fan them out and then press them into the filling. So now I'll grab my cranberries, some of them I've chopped up, and I'll place just a few in the center. And then I'll distribute the rest of the cranberries evenly in between the apples. And you'll see when this is done, it's great because you can slice this tart up. You can give one friend a slice of just cranberry. You can give your other friend who doesn't like cranberries a slice of just apple. It's perfect for Friendsgiving because there's a little bit of something for everybody. Really try and fill in those spaces where the filling is showing through with the cranberries. Cutting them up also helps make them a little bit easier to nudge into all those grooves you want to fill in. So now I'll take some thinly sliced almonds and I'll sprinkle these just around the edge of the tart. So now to promote a nice even color and caramelization on these apples, I'm going to brush them with some heavy cream. You could use milk here. If you didn't have that, I suppose you could also use a little bit of butter. Bring that heavy cream all the way to the edge. And then for even more texture and color, I have some turbinado sugar. Sprinkle that all over the top of the tart. I'm looking for the apples to look nice and caramelized. They'll feel tender if I press them with a toothpick or a fork. And you'll notice that around the edge of that tart, the filling will start to bubble up. It'll puff up and it'll look a little bit set. If you find that your tart is browning more quickly than you would like it to, you can tent the top of the tart with just a little bit of aluminum foil and let it bake the rest of the way. So you'll want to let this tart bake for upwards of 45 minutes. So I allowed this tart to bake for a full 45 minutes. The cranberries developed some really nice color. They've all burst open. The apples are nice and caramelized. The crust is caramelized on the edge. So once your tart has cooled completely, after several hours, it'll be ready to unmold. So to unmold your tart, there's a removable bottom. So use one hand and place it completely on the removable bottom, and then use your other hand to just guide that ring down. And then switch hands. So if you're a little nervous to take it off the removable bottom, you can certainly just leave it just like this. It kind of acts as a plate. It'll travel easily this way. It'll go to the table easily this way. But if you'd like to transfer it to a serving plate, which is what I recommend, you're going to want to get a butter knife or a thin spatula and try and find a space where the tart dough and the bottom have kind of separated from one another, and then just very gently move that spatula around to make sure it's not stuck. Guide it off. So it really wasn't that difficult to put together this stunning tart. It's definitely going to be a crowd pleaser at your Friendsgiving or Thanksgiving table. People are going to go crazy over it. If you want the full recipe for this tart, check out my blog, bakingwithdan.com. Don't forget to subscribe to Baking with Dan on YouTube. And if you have any questions, let me know. Happy fall baking, happy creative tart making, and until next time, stay sweet.